Welcome back to my channel. Today we will learn about the issue of one of the most explosive and shocking revelations to ever hit Forrester Creations. The drama that is currently unfolding at The Bold and the Beautiful is nothing short of a soap opera fan's wildest dream come true. We are talking about a secret that has been buried for decades, a romance that happened in the city of love, and a family connection that could destroy everything the Forrester family has built. This is the kind of storyline that will have viewers glued to their screens, gasping at every twist and turn, and desperately waiting to see how this bombshell will shake the foundation of one of daytime television's most iconic families. The tension at Forrester Creations has reached a fever pitch, and it all started with what seemed like an innocent moment between father and son. R.J. Forrester, the talented young designer who has been making waves in the fashion world, walked into the design office with an energy that could light up the entire building. He was practically bursting with excitement as he prepared to introduce his latest muse to his father, the legendary Ridge Forrester. For RJ, this was more than just showing his father another beautiful face that could inspire his designs. This was about sharing something special, something he believed could take his work to the next level. The young woman by his side was Dylan, a stunning beauty who had captured not just RJ's artistic imagination, but also, it seemed, his heart. She carried herself with a grace and mystery that made her the perfect subject for fashion photography and design work. And RJ could not wait to show his father the incredible sketches and concepts he had developed with Dylan as his inspiration. Ridge Forrester, the man who has seen it all in the fashion industry and in his personal life, initially appeared completely indifferent to his son's enthusiasm. After all, Ridge has worked with countless models and muses throughout his illustrious career. Beautiful women have always been part of the fashion world, and Ridge has developed a certain professional detachment when it comes to viewing them through the lens of design and creativity. He has trained himself over the years to separate the art from the personal, to look at a woman's features and see lines, shapes, and possibilities for clothing designs, rather than getting emotionally invested. So when RJ started his passionate presentation about Dylan, Ridge was going through the motions, nodding politely, offering the occasional professional comment, but not really engaging with the same level of excitement that his son was displaying. It was just another day at the office. Just another pretty face that would probably fade into the background once the next collection was complete. But then everything changed in an instant. Dylan, who had been standing quietly beside RJ, reached into her bag and pulled out something she always kept close to her heart. It was a portrait sketch, carefully preserved and obviously cherished, showing a woman who must have meant the world to her. She explained that this was her mother, a woman who had passed away years ago, and that she carried this drawing with her everywhere as a way to keep her mother's memory alive. For Dylan, this sketch was more than just a piece of paper with pencil marks on it. It was her connection to a parent she had lost, a tangible reminder of the woman who had given her life and raised her during her early years. She handed the portrait to Ridge, perhaps wanting to share this personal piece of herself with the father of the man who had been showing such interest in her. Or perhaps simply wanting to explain why she understood the power of art and design on such a deep, emotional level. Ridge took the sketch from Dylan's hands, and what happened next shocked everyone in the room. The color drained from his face as his eyes locked onto the image on that piece of paper. His hands began to tremble, and for a moment it seemed as though the powerful Ridge Forrester, the man who had faced down corporate takeovers, family betrayals, and countless personal dramas, was about to collapse right there in the design office. The portrait was not just any drawing of any woman. It was a face that Ridge recognized immediately, a face that he had not seen in decades, but that had never completely left his memory. The woman in that sketch was someone from Ridge's past, someone he had met during one of his trips to Paris many years ago, back when he was younger, and the world seemed full of romantic possibilities. Paris, the city of lights, the city of love, has always held a special place in Ridge's heart. He has traveled there countless times for fashion shows, for inspiration, for business meetings with European designers and manufacturers. But there was one trip, one particular visit to Paris that stood out from all the others because of a brief but intense romance that blossomed during those magical days. In the French capital, Ridge had met a woman who was everything he thought he wanted at that moment in his life. She was beautiful, sophisticated, artistic, and she understood the creative soul that drove Ridge's passion for fashion. They spent days together exploring the city, visiting museums, sitting in cafes, and losing themselves in conversations about art life and dreams. For a short time, Ridge felt like he had found something special, something that could have been more than just a vacation fling. But as it often happens in life, circumstances pulled them apart. Ridge had to return to Los Angeles, back to his responsibilities at Forrester Creations, back to the complicated web of relationships and family obligations that always seemed to define his existence. The woman stayed in Paris, and they lost touch. Ridge assumed that was the end of it, just another beautiful memory to add to his collection of romantic adventures. He never knew, never suspected that their brief time together had created something permanent, something that would come back decades later to turn his world completely upside down. That woman had been pregnant with his child, and she had never told him. She had raised their daughter alone, giving her the name Dylan, and had kept the secret until her death, leaving her daughter with only a portrait sketch and probably some stories about a talented American designer who had swept through Paris like a whirlwind before disappearing back to his life in California. Now, standing in the Forrester Creations design office, holding that portrait sketch in his shaking hands, Ridge realized the horrifying truth. Dylan was not just RJ's new muse. Dylan was not just another beautiful woman who had wandered into their lives. Dylan was his daughter, a daughter he never knew existed, and his son RJ was completely, utterly, dangerously unaware that the woman he was pursuing, the woman he was clearly falling for, was actually his half-sister. The realization hit Ridge like a freight train, and panic took over every rational thought in his mind. He could see the way RJ was looking at Dylan, the way his son's eyes lit up when he talked about her. The unmistakable signs of romantic interest that were developing between them. This was not just professional admiration between an artist and his muse. This was attraction, possibly even the beginning of love, and it had to be stopped immediately before something irreversible happened. Ridge's reaction was instantaneous and explosive. He did not take a moment to compose himself to think through how to handle this delicate situation with tact and discretion. All he could think about was the urgent need to separate RJ and Dylan before their relationship crossed any lines that could never be uncrossed. He shouted, his voice filled with a desperation that shocked everyone in the room. He demanded that RJ stay away from Dylan immediately right now, with no questions asked and no arguments tolerated. The volume and intensity of Ridge's outburst were completely out of character for the usually composed designer. Ridge has faced many crises in his life, but he has always prided himself on maintaining a certain level of control, of handling problems with style and authority. But this time was different. This time the stakes were too high, the consequences too terrible to contemplate, and Ridge could not afford to be subtle or measured in his response. The entire meeting room fell into stunned silence. Everyone who witnessed this scene could not understand what was happening. RJ was confused and hurt, unable to comprehend why his father was reacting so violently to what seemed like a harmless introduction of a model and muse. The other people in the office, designers and staff members who had gathered to see RJ's presentation, were equally baffled. They had never seen Ridge lose control like this, and they could not figure out what could possibly have triggered such an extreme reaction. Some might have thought Ridge was being irrationally protective, maybe jealous of his son's talent, or perhaps simply having a bad day and taking it out on everyone around him. But those who looked closely at Ridge's face could see something else entirely. This was not anger in the traditional sense. This was not jealousy or professional rivalry. This was fear, pure and absolute, fear, the kind of terror that grips a parent when they realize their child is in danger. When Ridge looked at Dylan, his expression was not one of hatred or disgust. He was not looking at her as an enemy or a threat to be eliminated. Instead, he was looking at her with the complicated emotions of a father who has just discovered a daughter he never knew existed. A daughter who is beautiful and intelligent, and who has grown up without him, without his guidance, without his protection. There was guilt in his eyes, guilt for not being there, for not knowing, for not somehow sensing that somewhere in the world he had a child who needed him. There was also profound sadness, sadness for all the years that were lost, for all the moments he missed, for the fact that their first real meeting had to happen under such catastrophic circumstances. And above all, there was fear. Fear that the truth would come out in the worst possible way. Fear that his family would be torn apart by this revelation. Fear that Dylan herself would be devastated to learn that the man she probably heard stories about from her mother, the mysterious American designer who had captured her mother's heart in Paris, was the same man whose son was now pursuing her romantically. Ridge understood in that moment that he was facing one of the most difficult situations of his entire life. He had to tell the truth. But how could he explain this to RJ without destroying his son's trust and breaking his heart? how could he reveal to Dylan that he was her father, that her mother had kept this secret for reasons he could only guess at, and that the connection she was forming with RJ was impossible because of a biological relationship neither of them knew existed? And how would he explain this to Brooke, his wife, who would undoubtedly have questions about this woman from his past and the child they had created together? The ramifications of this revelation would extend far beyond just RJ and Dylan. This would affect the entire Forrester family, creating ripples that would touch everyone from Steffi to Thomas to all the other family members who would suddenly have to adjust to the existence of another Forrester sibling. The ethical and emotional complexity of this situation is staggering. Dylan is an innocent victim in all of this, a young woman who came to Los Angeles probably hoping to pursue her dreams in the fashion industry, maybe even hoping to learn more about the man her mother had once loved, never imagining that she would end up in a situation where she would be attracted to her own half-brother. RJ is equally innocent, having no way of knowing that the woman who inspired his artistic vision was someone he could never, under any circumstances, pursue romantically. And Ridge, despite being the one who created this situation through his actions decades ago, could not have anticipated that his brief romance in Paris would come back to haunt him in such a devastating way. The tragedy here is that no one intended for this to happen, and yet everyone will suffer because of circumstances beyond their control. As the dust settles from Ridge's explosive outburst, the questions begin to pile up. How will Ridge explain his behavior without revealing the truth immediately? Will he pull RJ aside for a private conversation? Or will he be forced to make this revelation in front of the entire office? How will Dylan react when she learns that Ridge is her father? Will she be angry that her mother never told him about her existence? Or will she understand that her mother had reasons for keeping this secret? And what about RJ? How will he handle the news that the woman he was falling for is actually his sister? The emotional trauma of this revelation could affect him for years, possibly changing his approach to relationships and trust forever. These are the questions that will drive the storyline forward in the coming weeks and months on The Bold and the Beautiful. And fans will be watching every moment to see how this family navigates through what may be their most challenging crisis yet.